everybody. Joe Moore here. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. I'm joined today by Tom Feegel of Beond. How are you doing today, Tom?
Good, Joe. Thank you very much for having me. Nice to see you.
Yeah. Excited to have you on the show finally. We've been talking about this for a bit, and glad to finally get something on tape and get it out to some folks. So can you tell us a little bit about Beond?
Of course. Beond is we were started in 2020, the company. We opened for clinical treatments in 2021. Beond is it's part hospital, it's part mental health treatment facility, it's part retreat, and it's part resort. It's the it's the home for 8 full-time licensed credentialed doctors and 19 ICU certified nurses and about 20 non-clinical team members. And we have the privilege of treating a wide range of people for health and optimization, PTSD, depression, acute anxiety, as well as chemical dependency with Ibogaine here in Cancún, Mexico.
Oh, that's outstanding. I love that you're able to do both. The first one I was aware of, I think, was Crossroads, and then I've seen, some pop up and go down all over the place for the last, 10 years or so. And that's super interesting to me. And I like that you're kind of making it a kind of like hospital/wellness situation.
Yeah, with the retreat angle built in. So it's, we really do feel like the purpose is to help people have a profound and meaningful series of experiences, not just meditation and cold therapy and fitness and nutrition and sound healing and art therapy, but also psychedelics in an environment which feels familiar and comfortable, where it's private, where they're treated with the respect and appreciation that they deserve for making this commitment. These are profound and important experiences where they usually discover an innate ability to heal themselves so that they take that after they leave, after they're discharged.
Yeah, I love that. So how did you come around to learning about Ibogaine and wanting to be so committed that you open a facility?
Well, I had never heard of Ibogaine until someone in my family needed Ibogaine for chemical dependency. They, like many other people, were prescribed an opiate for a routine dental procedure. When they took it for the first time, they said they felt normal. And they didn't want to stop taking it, then eventually couldn't get it. And ended up, this story is more common today than it was 16 years ago when this happened to my family member. But they ended up an IV heroin user and went to 9 different rehabs in the United States, all the high-end ones, and would do what they said to the best of their ability, and eventually ended up relapsing. And someone said, you need to try Ibogaine in Mexico. Now, if you think this is cutting edge today or innovative, 16 years ago it was very different. And the place that she went was totally substandard, basically a house with people hanging around doing Ibogaine. There was no medical, psychological infrastructure whatsoever, but the medicine worked. And I heard this story over and over again. This medicine saved their life, but she would say, there's no place I recommend that you go. When people would ask, I have a mother, father, sister, brother, friend who needs this, where can they go? And she would say, there's really no place I would recommend. And so I thought, I had the opportunity in 2020, having just left a CEO position at a very fast growth consumer packaged goods company, actually hand sanitizer during the pandemic. We scaled that company and it was FDA approved, highly regulated. And I thought, I want to build the place they should have gone. Why doesn't that exist? where someone could be treated with Ibogaine, but also feel like they were in an environment that was conducive to true healing, not just detox or, hanging out and doing psychedelics. That we needed the doctors, the nurses, the programming, the infrastructure, the technology to make it the place where someone that I love would go, and I would feel highly confident that they would be successful. So I decided to investigate that. I talked to the right lawyers, I talked to the right doctors, I talked to the right researchers, some which were in the United States, some around the world, and slowly but surely put a small team together. Back then we had only 7 rooms, now we have 20 rooms and 2 properties. So we're very careful about scaling, but there were people that knew how to do this, and we had to put them together and make sure that as a U.S. citizen operating in Mexico, that I would not be in violation of any law in the United States. We have investors that they would not be at risk of any liability or recourse. So we took this very slowly in the beginning phase to make sure that every I was dotted and every T was crossed. And then we opened in 2021.
Outstanding.
Thank you.
So I have a semantic problem with the way we talk about things often, where people are like, what is safe? What I want to question, like, let's have a definition, because like water's not safe,
right.
Too much oxygen's unsafe, and like
right.
Like we don't really have a good idea of that, and like,
yeah, we have to break it down to what are the risks,
right.
in a very meticulous way. So when I think our team of doctors who are some are board certified in intensive care, emergency medicine, mm-hmm. we have a board certified anesthesiologist on staff, they live in a world where they're trying to help people. They're analyzing data all the time, using statistics to better understand what is the risk and can it be mitigated effectively. So what is safe, I think, gets down to the question of what data and how much of it and what are you comparing it to try to guide this process most effectively. So people can first, even before they come to Beond, they can make the best decision they can. Is this for them? Will this help? And then only after that decision-making process, which is we've always believed that education is part of what we do. Whether people come to Beond or not, they should have the best information they can. So we curated every known research study on Ibogaine and put it on our website and said, read these. And we summarized them. In fact, Thomas Kingsley Brown, who led the largest clinical trial for MAPS, did this work for us. He read all these studies and summarized them and said, this is the information you need. We also produced an entire overview of what is safe. What are the questions that anyone should ask anyone else who's offering to administer Ibogaine? What are the criteria of evaluation you should use? Many people review that literature. They use it to make a decision as to whether to come to Beond, but I hope they use it to make a decision to go anywhere or do anything, because we certainly want to help people make the best decision they can. So there's more to that answer when we get into it, but I think the first piece is there's very good information out there, but I always thought someone who's considering coming to Beond or changing their life and using a psychedelic, especially Ibogaine, should not have to Google, is Ibogaine safe for, and fill in the blank. Will Ibogaine work for blank? We should just make that available to them before they even reach out to us. And so we do.
So, okay. So when I started learning about Ibogaine, my jaw was on the floor, because what else has this promise? And then, given how deadly opiates are in this country, United States and elsewhere, it seemed like a really fair trade-off, risk-reward, largely speaking, with room for us to mitigate things like the QT elongation situation where people can have like a cardiac event inside a session, right? Like there's ways to mitigate this. There's ways to test and screen for it. And some people in the throes of their addiction can end up with a heart that's just not really strong enough for this kind of intense experience. I'm certainly not a doctor here, but I think when you're going through super intense things like this, you want to kind of have a thumbs up from a number of people. And I actually even screen people from doing breath work with me in a really, really serious way, where it's like, I don't want any adverse events in here, so I'm gonna, not really allow for that. So why we're talking is that Beond, there was somebody died at Beond earlier this year, and there was a bunch of articles.
No,
on
not
it.
this year. Not this
year.
year.
Oh, it was last
year?
year?
In 2022.
Oh, that's a long time ago. Wow.
Yeah.
It's interesting that 3 media outlets got on it recently then. That's strange. And thanks for clearing that up.
Sure.
It's helpful. So in 2022 that happened. And I read the articles. It seemed like you did a pretty decent job after the event. But how do we want to talk about this publicly? I don't, this is the first time I've kind of dug into something this serious.
Yeah, I mean, I think that first of all, the context is we pride ourselves on welcoming people who are very sick. They have severe chemical dependency or PTSD or traumatic brain injury or depression. And every single one of them has tried everything that's occurred to them in the past. And so we're working oftentimes outside of our health and optimization practice and that population, many of whom have other issues. We're working with people that are really, really sick. And so we are absolutely committed to helping them if we can. And that's the beginning, right? So we have to, first of all, I hold in my heart now, deepest sympathies for the family of the individual that passed at Beond after their Ibogaine. This is a person who was in and out of institutions and was routinely in very dire straits, right, leading up until their evaluation. But we still evaluated them very carefully. And they were clinically qualified to do Ibogaine, and they successfully did Ibogaine. And they were clean after the Ibogaine, met with their family. For the first time in decades, they had a clear, loving conversation with the family. But yet, still, this is a devastating event. It was the hardest thing I've ever done is to call that person's family and to personally volunteer to do that, to explain what happened and immediately go to the airport and fly to their home and spend 2 days with them grieving and explaining what happened with the support of our doctors, walking through every detail of their preparation, their evaluation, their preparation, the successful treatment, the aftercare, and to really live that experience with them as best I could, so that I understood what they were feeling like, and they understood our mission. And I can tell you, the parent of this individual looked me directly in the eyes as I left to go back to Mexico to carry out her wishes, and said, "You cannot let this deter you from your mission." I'm so grateful that when he passed, he was clean. I haven't seen him like that in decades. No one, that's real. His best friend, gave me a big hug and said, you have to do this work. This is the closest we ever got to seeing him successful in this effort. And it changed our team. It really gave us, I think, a much finer focus on every aspect of what we do. We already had safety procedures and safety protocols and screenings and all the technology you'd find in an ICU in our treatment rooms. But still, I think the significance of this work became much more clear to us all. I mean, every day we see people who come into Beond thinking, I am a problem. I can't live like this anymore. Whether they're a combat veteran, someone who is we've treated active duty law enforcement, or chemical dependency. And we have to do our best to make sure they're ready, but do our best to help them. And it's successful. It's very successful. So this particular event really brought home the solemnity of this mission and these duties for all of our staff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks for
and
sharing.
I think that, you mentioned safety and the definition of safety. Part of our job is to continually refine what safer, what effective means. And that means, for us, it means collecting data. 176 data points on every client that comes through digitally, and paying people like neuroscientists and MDs with MBAs and ICU nurses to comb through that and look for the patterns so that we consistently improve performance. And performance originates, it's the first piece of performance is safety. It needs to be safer.
Mm. Yeah, I really appreciate that kind of an approach. It's kind of like, how do we do incremental improvement over long periods of time so that, like kind of modeling something like a Toyota, right? Where there's just, that's part of their culture. And I think, we really need to do that here as well. So that's a big reason why I really appreciate you being transparent about how things transpired. Now, you said that this particular client died after the session. What I read was like multiple days after. Is that right?
Yeah, after we call it a primary dose, as opposed to a flood dose, which is a colloquialism. But after that, yes, that's correct. And there's some details of this that obviously speak to the article as distinct from the individual's medical care, and to the degree that we can, I'm very comfortable talking about the article, but I think want to be careful to continue to respect the privacy and confidentiality of the patient. We are voluntarily HIPAA-compliant. We fully expect that we will be able to do this in the United States sometime, and we operate as if we are there now. In our privacy policies, in our protocols, in our licensure, in our certifications. Every staff member is ACLS level 1, and many are ACLS level 2 certified. Certainly
And that's
everyone
advanced
that
care
has,
life support for those who are not familiar with that.
that's advanced cardio life support.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
where you have to maintain your certificate and you're tested on a regular basis from an external party. So I think it's important for us to respect the privacy of the individual. I continue to be in touch with the family and the friends of this individual, and they chose to not participate in this article. They chose to not allow the journalist to use the name of the individual, the actual name. And as far as I know, there's only one source related to any aspect of this story. There's certainly some, opinions in the story about what could and should happen in general in psychedelics. And I'm still proud, very proud, of the way we handled this devastating, very sad, tragic event. How the doctors operated, how we treated the individual and their family all the way through to today. They reached out to me after this piece came out and said, we didn't participate in that. That's not what he would have wanted. That's not, that is not a good use of the story of his effort to heal, his effort to grow and change and put this behind him.
So can you talk to me a little bit about what does safety look like here? Like what kind of things are being done generally around Ibogaine and then specifically at your location?
Yeah, sure. I think the first component of that is expertise, is, really having the types of people who have mitigated these types of risks, cardiac monitoring, for example, very careful evaluations, patient screening and monitoring, before they ever entered the domain of psychedelics. They've worked in clinical environments, so all of our doctors have worked in some of the best hospitals where they've worked for a decade or more. So they work in the ICU, they work in the emergency room, they know how to treat a patient during a type of procedure that could be risky, surgery or anything else. So you need to have the best possible expertise available. And what that means for us at Beond is we have to hire great doctors and then train them to understand psychedelics. We can't hire psychedelic practitioners and hope that they understand emergency medicine or intensive care or anesthesiology, because they don't. So the second is we have to have very strict protocols. We need to have team members who are used to operating within the confines of a very strict protocol, where the same questions are asked every single client, every single patient. The same data is collected every single time and evaluated the exact same way by multiple team members on the clinical leadership team. So we're, incrementally minimizing the likelihood that something will be overlooked. In the case of this individual, nothing was overlooked. We went through those procedures, so very careful screening. We're not talking about filling out a form on the web. We're talking about using a HIPAA-compliant patient portal that has an exhaustive set of questions about psychology, physiology, history of healthcare, any interventions, any hospitalization, family history, etc. All the things you would expect to be asked in a hospital by a surgeon in a major metropolitan city in the United States, or better, frankly. We think we don't limit ourselves. Collect all that data and then understand it, review it on a video conversation with the prospective client so that they know that you know what they gave you and we know the details of their health history. Only then can someone be deemed clinically qualified. And if there's something missing or something's unclear or something that needs to be further evaluated, to recommend the proper testing that they should do to submit this information so that they can be evaluated. Then when they are qualified, first of all, if they're not, help them find a solution that does work for them, right? Help them find, an alternative that might help them. But if they are qualified, when they're admitted, review every bit of that. Conduct the test ourselves. So we do our own blood work, we do our own admissions process, our own urinalysis, we use the same technology that you would expect in the States to test for any chemical dependency, 24 panel UDTs, blood work to test for complete blood counts, enzyme levels, and many other things. And of course we're conducting 12 lead EKGs that are reviewed by multiple clinical leaders at the point of admission. That's another key step, is to verify everything that the person said before they came. And this is expensive and it takes time. It takes us 2 hours for every single person that's admitted just to do the testing, just the EKGs and the consultations and the UDTs. The blood draws, and the lab work comes back 12 to 24 hours later. Only then can we plan the treatment when that's going to happen, because there might be some mitigation or remediation that needs to happen over the course of a few days. In the case of fentanyl or opiates, certain chemical dependency like alcohol, we already know that there's going to be additional time. So another factor is have enough time built into the treatment plan to be thorough and exhaustive and comprehensive in these evaluations, so that you can remediate anything that might need to be addressed. We routinely do additional echocardiograms, stress tests, put someone on a treadmill, let them wear a Holter. That an EKG shows you a snapshot of what's going on in your heart. It's very accurate. But if there's some variability that needs to be more thoroughly examined, then you need at least 24 hours of data. And then that will show you if this variability happened at a particular time, at a particular frequency, and so on. And so the good news is the people that come to Beond that do have that variability, they learn a lot about what's going on in their body, because they probably haven't heard that before. They need a doctor to explain what's going on. So that's sort of the physiological safety invocation, to make sure we have the right people that know what they're doing, that have been trained, that maintain all of their certifications, board certification. They also have to work like a team. One of the most important things to overcome in an environment like Beond's is having these individuals who think they're an expert in this topic and someone else is an expert in another topic. But when they work in the hospital, they don't oftentimes have to work as a team. They may have shift turnovers, but they don't often work as a team in the way that you might really need. And so they have clinical rounds every single day, where they review the status of every single patient. And we use quantifiable metrics to evaluate how are they doing, how are they being measured on psychological scores, physiological data, and we have our nurses are collecting vitals from people in many cases every hour. They're taking blood pressure. People are filling out on a digital platform a survey of how are they doing, so that all that data can be analyzed and reviewed so that if we need to make a modification about the treatment during the 10 to 14 days that they're with us, we can. That's a good start for increasing the likelihood of safety and minimizing unknown risks. That's all happening before the treatment begins. During the treatment, of course, we're using, we say we have the world's sexiest ICU. It has exactly the same technology, that you would find in an ICU. Same digital technology, same procedures, same talent, same drills have been run on a regular basis to make sure that people know what to do, know how to communicate, know how to support each other if something were to happen. But the treatment room just looks cooler. It's got aromatherapy and noise canceling technology and special lighting and beautiful murals and so on. But it is an ICU, and the people who work there and spend all their days and many nights there, they know what they're doing.
Now, there's often an IV installed in people or put into people for their session.
Always.
Yeah, and is that around electrolyte imbalances, or what's the primary reason there?
So there's many reasons, but so the first reason is that that the doctors and nurses need vein access in advance. So in the event that somebody needed a medication to navigate to mitigate a risk profile, they would have access in advance. The second is, of course, that person is being provided fluids and electrolytes, including magnesium and others, before, during, and after their Ibogaine treatment to maintain a status that is within the confines of a risk profile that the doctors are looking for. And so the IV is providing them fluids, but it's also mitigating the QT prolongation. But the reason for that is that these people need vein access in advance. What we would be appalled to see in any environment would be when someone is detected of having some sort of difficulty, that's the time to call the doctor, or that's the time to begin the risk mitigation procedures. We do blood draws on a regular basis, so the IV can be used for that, because we're testing for enzyme levels, electrolyte levels, because before the Ibogaine, if there is an electrolyte deficiency, we're going to mitigate that days before. And we're going to run that test again to make sure that person is ready.
So really, if this happened in 22, I assume you have some speculations on to what happened at this point. Do you have any you could share? Like why 2 days later could somebody go?
People have adverse events during a rehabilitative process all the time. 3,500 people will die this year in rehabs in the United States. And there's, it can be very stressful on the body. There's, I can't, explain exactly what happened. I think the family's satisfied with the explanation that the doctors provided, but there's any one of a number of reasons why this could have happened. It is shocking and extremely unfortunate, and we should do everything we can to avoid that. But There isn't something that I can explain to you at this time that would make sense of it.
Yeah. So how I like to talk about this is just how many people per day are dying. Not only, you said 3,500 in clinics and in rehabs a
Yeah.
year, which is terrible. And we can talk about the low quality of clinics generally, like performance of clinics in a little bit. But, the drug war is one of the major issues here, right? Like we've not been able to research this appropriately on account of the expense of the drug war. And, but we've figured out how to do this in my mind in a safe enough capacity. And like there's just so many people dying from fentanyl and other overdoses every single day that
and suicide, veteran suicide as well. Yeah. And the collateral
22
damage
to 45
of that,
veteran suicides daily.
Exactly. So I think one of the reasons we started Beond was we saw an article in I think it was 2020, late 2020, from I quoted the CDC that said 100,000 overdose deaths in 1 year for the first time in the United States. And if you do the math, that's like 1 every 5 minutes. And if you think about it, those are someone's baby. That's somebody's brother and sister and husband and wife and mother and father. And I knew this worked because my family member had the benefit of it. I myself have been in recovery over 2 decades. And how could I know that it worked and know that I was the result of my own recovery from drugs and alcohol, allowed me to have a family and a career, and stand by and say, oh, well, maybe somebody should go create a place that has the right talent, the right technology, the right environment, the right type of programming, and just go do something else. Start another, venture-backed startup in San Francisco. It felt to me like, when people say they're called to do Ibogaine, I felt like we were called to do everything we could do to create a place where people could go and be as safe as possible and really appreciated for what they're trying to accomplish. But yeah, people are dying. If you go, in every major metropolitan city, people are, on the streets, and their law enforcement, incarceration has not worked. The only option that exists is another opiate, a long-acting opiate, which is basically, a life sentence. So to get off an opiate, many of these people started with a surgery or, on a pain medication, and they ended up using this extraordinarily, the world's most powerful painkiller, and there's no way out except for another opiate. It just, we already know that the story of, the manufacturers of OxyContin and others, this is no longer conjecture, about whether drug companies withheld information or over-marketed or over-distributed. They've already paid the fines. They've already been sued and paid billions of dollars out to states' attorney generals. And now those states' attorney generals are obligated to spend that money to help those people get better, to get well. And the best they can do is a long-acting opiate like methadone or Suboxone or Subutex. I just simply don't believe that's the best that we can do. And so, it is catastrophic in its implications, and it's intergenerational. That's the other problem. Someone who is the eyewitness to this in their family is many times higher likelihood of repeating that pattern. And so, if someone wants help, where are they supposed to go if they can't find this type of treatment in a safer, ethical, scientifically based environment?
Right. Um,
It's
yeah, thanks for
unacceptable.
that. Agreed. Agreed. It's pretty tragic. I'm I'm very I can't say I'm totally split. I just understand that there's some sort of compromise here. Um, in terms of like what the clinics are doing, like they've had to compromise because all they have is Suboxone, but like it's actually a pretty good business model for them, right? Like I if you can count on somebody coming back to your clinic like 7 times, because that's like the average relapse rate, and speculation on that number, everybody, but I know that people don't often stay clean. Do you have a figure on that? Like what percentage of people, nationally are coming out clean from a rehab clinic, like inpatient
From a
situation?
conventional rehab,
Yeah.
that number is well guarded and manipulated depending upon which article you read. What I do know is that 2.5 million people will go to rehab this year in the United States. And of those, 50% will leave before their treatment is even over. And of those that stay, 1 out of 9 reports that they had a satisfactory experience. And when I
One
saw
of
that,
nine.
yeah, yeah. When I saw that data in an annual sort of roundup industry report last year, I thought to myself, what other industry would that be possible in? Can you imagine if everyone who got on a plane got off before it took off? 50% of the passengers said, no, I'm not staying. It's uncomfortable. They're not treating me right. I'd rather leave. And then of those that made the flight, only 1 out of 9 flew that airline again. The only way that would be possible is if there was some large institutional subsidy that made it possible. And that's precisely what's happening. Law enforcement, the judicial system, and insurance are sending people to rehab in large part. And those people they're really not inspired to dig deep to the root cause of what's underlying this behavior, whether it's trauma or some other form of root unworthiness. They're in pain. These people are in pain, and they need to be helped to understand, what are they creating? What life are they creating by getting off this stuff? Not just come to, a drive-through detox. It simply doesn't work.
Right. So, okay, there's another point in the article that I feel like I need to bring up, and it was something about one of the clinicians you hired from Miami, was it? Like, can you speak
Mm-hmm.
to kind of the critiques on that, doctor?
Yes. So when we started, of course, we thought we're going to canvass all of the known experts. We'll retain them as consultants to develop various insights and protocols and procedures. I literally talked to everyone that I could find who had any relationship with Ibogaine. Researchers like Deborah Mash, researchers like Joe Barsulia, Tom Kingsley Brown, MDs, and I wanted to find one or more MDs that was an addiction medicine specialist who, board certified in addiction medicine, practiced in the United States, had experience with Ibogaine, and had done it themselves, and had treated many people as one of many advisors. There was only one who fit all 4 of those criteria, and we retained him. People told me, he he's hard to work with. He's an expert, but he was an advisor and a consultant. After he was, we separated as a consultant. He was doing high-end treatments for, platinum-level artists. He would go down to Mexico and had a lot of expertise, but he wasn't the only advisor. But after we parted ways, for him not being able to work on a team, I mentioned that before, having doctors that really gel and think in that, hive mentality with a common goal in mind. There is no one doctor who's in charge of, one particular procedure. They have to work together carefully, and he couldn't do it. We parted ways. Apparently he relapsed. He was also in recovery. He relapsed himself and got into trouble. He was, accused of horrendous crimes of, I think it was human trafficking. I don't think he was. I think later it was settled. But we said then to our staff what we said publicly, which is, this person is not a team member, and we hope that they get the help they deserve, and we hope that they're held accountable for what they did. But they were, not a team member. And hadn't been a team member for nearly a year when that happened, or maybe over a year, I can't remember exactly. Again, I think referring to that as newsworthy is drawing a correlation that needn't be and isn't relevant to psychedelics, and it's not particularly relevant to increasing the safe, ethical, scientific, compassionate use of Ibogaine for addiction, PTSD, TBI, or health and optimization that we do. Of course, for chemical dependency as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. And then let's talk about this ethicist that was cited as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we retained an ethicist to help us make some decisions, to ask ourselves some questions that might come up as we're treating people, as we're counseling family members or working with other therapists. We're always gathering information, making decisions about what we can and cannot do, what we should or should not do, and why. And so there were outside experts that help us with that. One of them is named Joseph Holcomb. Wonderful guy, incredibly intelligent guy that focuses on psychedelics and other domains. And he was contacted for the Rolling Stone piece, but he wasn't informed that they were writing about Beond, or he would have obviously had an ethical question of his own. Does he disclose that they're asking him questions that have implications about an article about his client? And he contacted me after the piece and said, no one told me that they were writing about you. They led me to believe it was a general article about Ibogaine. And, I think he's a great resource for people. He's a, dedicated expert in a very niche part of the sector, but a very important part of the sector because, not only at Beond, but many places, no one's ever done this before. There is no roadmap. We're working this out on a daily basis with the best experts that we can possibly find, and he's a valuable advisor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find that, a lot of storytelling and journalism, we'll call it, in psychedelia is like, it's not what we'd expect. The truth of the matter is the opioid crisis is horrendous. The drug war is not helping anybody, including clinics, to be able to operate better and safer.
The article seemed to suggest that this particular client, and therefore other clients, was not properly evaluated or screened. They were thoroughly screened and thoroughly evaluated and thoroughly prepared to come to Beond. But the suggestion, because they only had one source, was that there was something they referred to, which is completely false, the idea of an emergency Ibogaine treatment. As if there's pressure to rush someone into Beond and treat them rapidly because they're in acute withdrawals or they're overdosing or something. That would never happen at Beond. We would always evaluate someone and thoroughly screen them before they ever were approved to come. Then and only then would that be scheduled. Could we prioritize someone? Sure, but that would we would never accelerate the process. There was a suggestion in the article that I thought was interesting, which is I think the reference was something like, well, when a company scales, they must have to cut corners. And that line in particular, among others, really stuck with me, because having scaled companies that are regulated, and obviously Ibogaine in Mexico is unregulated, but that doesn't mean we operate in a cavalier manner. It suggested to me that somebody in contributing to the article thought that cutting corners is an effective business strategy for scaling. Either they cut corners themselves and they think everyone else does, which we do not, or they've never actually scaled a business, because a good way to prevent a business from scaling is to cut corners. It's inherently a flawed concept, to have an unsafe plane, even if you can make more of them, for example. It's just it's a flawed, logic. There was some suggestion that multiple doses of Ibogaine is somehow inappropriate or inherently dangerous. It's not true. We do the exact same test that we would do at admissions prior to the primary dose. So everything I described before with the EKG and the blood work and the UDTs is verified again for a third time before the primary dose of Ibogaine. It's also done after the Ibogaine, because we want to collect the data. We want to know what's going on in someone afterwards. And of course, we want to know that they're healthy, that their well-being is secured. But if we do additional, what we call supplementary doses of Ibogaine, we do it all again. Because something could have changed, and there's no way to know. And so this idea that somehow additional Ibogaine doses administered, is increasing risk, can be mitigated with additional thorough medical screening. And of course, every bit of the period prior to any treatment at Beond, and frankly, it should happen everywhere, is monitored with the best possible technology by people who really know how to use it, so that these, any hint of a increase in risk profile can be mitigated. Where people, I think, get into trouble is when they either don't have the right talent, don't have the right technology, they don't know how to use it, and therefore, they don't detect some adverse event prior to it happening or before it gets really bad. But I think that, this article raised ideas that are just not factually accurate. And they weren't specific accusations about Beond. They were quotes by a single source individual who, the writer spoke with. Not an immediate family member.
So one of the final suggestions, and this is where we can be a little constructive, it was around there not necessarily being like an internationally recognized group that kind of regulates this. That's kind of a pipe dream, given we're still deep in the drug war and this is super illegal. But I don't know, like what
in the United
what
States.
Do you think is a good idea that this kind of movement can work on to try to get some sort of I don't know, like standards? And here's a quick frame though, Tom. So I chatted with I feel awkward even saying this out loud. I was chatting with a fellow of the Cato Institute who is a medical doctor out of Arizona, Cato Institute being a libertarian think tank, and they talked about a lot of things, including not necessarily having like one single recognized body, but perhaps multiple. And it's okay that it's not 100% centralized because maybe we don't agree on some fundamentals and we need to like do it our way. And
sure.
I don't know, let's hear your point. I just wanted to get that out.
Well, I mentioned a little bit of this before, but I'll build on it. So first of all, I think there can be and should be generally recognized, pre-admissions procedures that everyone could and should follow. And if there is a better way to educate people about the risks of Ibogaine or psychedelics that we use, to help them really understand that there are risks and there are many benefits, that everyone could do in more or less the same way. When we started Beond, one of the things that I was really appalled by was no one even talked about what it cost. They didn't talk. There were clinics that had websites, but it was this shadowy kind of culture because they were afraid. And one of the insights that I think we had early on was if people are afraid to do the work, then there are people who are coming to receive the treatment should be afraid, right? We need to be able to be as transparent as possible about the risks, the benefits, the qualifications of the people involved, and we could all use a similar set of questions to help people give the best information they could to a treatment facility. The second thing that is still pretty shocking to me is that we just assumed that all the data should be collected and all of it should be digitized for every client from prior to treatment, during treatment, after treatment, and then after they're discharged. We just assumed that would be standard. And when we approached other practitioners and said, hey, maybe we should build a data warehouse and we'll put our data in and you put your data in and then we can all analyze it and compare notes, they said, we don't have the data digitized. We have it, if we have it at all, we have it on paper. And we were just like, we will literally tell you how we digitize it, how we collect it, but you're going to have to pay for the software and train your people to do it. But I think that's another opportunity, is for anyone who is considering this type of treatment, they should expect a level of sophistication of the technical infrastructure, not just the clinical technical infrastructure, but the data collection and the ability to analyze data. Because I would just ask the question, how are you getting smarter and more effective at what you do if you're not analyzing the data effectively? And so every interaction that any nurse or doctor has with any client at Beond, before they come, during their stay, there's notes. they're immediately accessible in a robust and standardized electronic records management system, so that we can go back and look at, what was the profile of this individual? What were they taking? What were they reporting? What were they suffering from? Were they, male, female? Did they have chemical dependency at all? Because we have another one that might be similar. And so we want to know everything we can know statistically about the people who have come before them. That, I think, could and should be, universal. And I think there's part of where we are right now that's confusing, because there are retreats, there are ayahuasca retreats, and there are psilocybin retreats, and those are generally, good people trying to do the best work they can, but they have a different risk profile. And so when there's an Iboga retreat or an Ibogaine facility, I think there's a tolerance for a certain lack of standardization and operating procedures and documentation and clinical expertise that is unnecessary and unacceptable. There's nothing about an Iboga retreat, where they use Iboga instead of Ibogaine, and it's more of a ceremony, and you're going sort of somewhat off the grid or something like that, that would prevent you from having clinical expertise to do the evaluations, or clinical expertise on site to mitigate these risks. I don't think that the Iboga plant spirit is going to be offended if you have a trained, licensed, credentialed physician making sure people are safe. So I don't think having a organizing body is going to happen anytime soon, but we could organize ourselves, and Beond would be, we would be very supportive of that idea. And I think, frankly, where we're going, that's necessary, because we expect to do this in the United States. It's one of the reasons why we have all the data, is to show regulators and policymakers exactly what's happened and exactly how this works and how they can do it too. And we'd be happy to help them train their doctors, and ideally use an environment that is not so clinical as a hospital. Everything I've said makes it sound like we're a strictly clinical environment, but we also have cold therapy and floating sound healing and art therapy and meditation training and activities that make people feel inspired on the personal development side. We do workshops every day to facilitate preparation with a set of materials that people can use before they come, they can use with us, they'll be guided by coaches, they have peer support, and they can use it when they go home. They can actually teach their family, what are their intentions, what is their mantra, what is their vision for a future free of these symptoms of depression or TBI or chemical dependency. And we think that that makes it not clinical. That's, we're a class 1 medical facility. We could operate as a hospital, but it doesn't look and feel like that. It feels like a place you'd want to spend 10 days or 14 days.
Mm.
Or you'd want to
Amazing.
work if you were a doctor or a nurse. Yeah. I mean, it should be a beautiful experience. And we've noticed, I was recently at a hospital for a procedure, and Cancun is a really, it has been a destination for medical procedure, dental procedures, IVF. People come for cosmetic surgery and other procedures because it's perceived to be more cost effective.
Right on.
Therefore,
And
all the
agreed.
doctors, many of the doctors and nurses speak English, and their bedside manner is familiar to them with people from the United States. But I was in the hospital recently, and I was like, this is really depressing. Like, where's the love? we have videos at Beond that we use to train nurses on the topic of taking an EKG with love. You know, like the heart center is an emotional sort of, operating, network operating center for the human body. It's not just a pump. You know, you're not a machine that needs a mechanic. And so we think of the mission of Beond as helping people grow and heal, not just sort of stop something or get over something. We want to really inspire them or help them inspire themselves as to what are they going to do once they are healed. And, you know, if you ever broke your ankle skiing there in Colorado, you know, the doctor will give you a cast, but they don't ask you, so Joe, what are you going to do when your ankle's healed? You know, what mountain are you going to climb? What race are you going to do? You know, isn't this going to be great? You know, to use your mind to envision a better future because your ankle's healed. They just put a cast on it and say, come back in 6 weeks and I'll cut it off. You know, and that we really feel like those conventional, you know, methodologies are insufficient to allow people to tap into that innate ability to heal and to really be inspired as to what are they going to do with it when they do heal.
All right, so we should work to close this out. Is there anything we may have missed that you think feels important for people to be aware of?
No, I think we covered a lot. I think that, you know, I think the ethical standards, Ibogaine psychedelics are still considered experimental. And I think that one of our obligations is to really envision a future of these treatments in a clinical environment in the United States, but it's not going to be the same clinical environment. You know, whether it's MDMA or psilocybin or some other psychedelic, just handing people a pill and, you know, a set of headphones and an eye mask, and not really preparing them and supporting them and integrating them for a very, you know, sometimes very long and effective period, is not going to work. You know, I think we're seeing the beginning of a radical transformation in the way healthcare in general, but mental health in particular, is delivered. And what's interesting to us, the more doctors we recruit, the more of them that have done psychedelics before they went to medical school. So they had an experience where they then believed that they were inspired, and they chose to go to medical school to learn all the organic chemistry and, you know, anatomy and specialized. And I think that, you know, the doctors that my kids get to go to are going to be very different than the doctors that, you know, my parents went to. And that's exciting. It's exciting to be a part of that, the transformation of that skill set. It's bringing a little bit more of the art back into medicine and a little bit more of the quality, you know. At Beond, you'll see that if you ever come, we have these big posters that say, like, the experience is the medicine. Or, we trust in science, but not more than our compassion. And, you know, fear is the barrier to healing, for example. These are all over the place. And the guests read them and they're like, I really like that poster. Can I buy that poster? Or whatever, we don't sell them. But I then explain, that's for the staff. That's not for you. That's to remind the staff that we are only licensed to be a hospital. We're not we don't want to become one, you know. And so, yeah, I think I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you. It's been thorough and detailed, and I love what you're doing to try to, you know, help people actually be educated and feel educated about what's really going on in psychedelics, and particularly the journalism or writing about psychedelics.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for making the time to do this with us. I think it's really important that you came forward and are working to set the record straight. And please keep it going. Can't wait
Thank
to
you very
hear
much.
what y'all are up to.
Yeah, I look forward to continuing this conversation about our Veterans Program, our Research Institute, all these things that are coming up that will help more people have access both to the treatments and to the data that we're analyzing to really understand safety and efficacy better.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tom. Until next time.
All right. Thank you.